Think silent films were innocent and tame? Think again. Before censorship cracked down, early cinema pushed boundaries that would make modern audiences gasp. Welcome to the Wild West of filmmaking, where directors shocked viewers without saying a word. These aren't just old movies, they're the forbidden reels that changed everything. The Cheat, 1915. Cecil B. DeMille wasn't always making biblical epics with thousands of extras. Back in 1915, he dropped a bomb on American audiences with The Cheat, featuring a story so scandalous it rewrote what could be shown on screen. This twisted tale follows a socialite who borrows money from a wealthy Japanese businessman who then demands physical compensation when she can't repay. The film's villain literally brands the heroine with a hot iron, marking her as his property. Audiences gasped at the scene's raw intensity, with its shadows dramatically highlighting the violence. The New York Times called it horrible, yet horribly fascinating, perfectly capturing the love-hate relationship viewers had with this boundary-pushing film. DeMille knew exactly what he was doing. The lighting techniques he pioneered here, using shadows to suggest even more disturbing implications, became a hallmark of film noir decades later. When public backlash erupted over the Asian villain, Paramount actually reshot portions in 1918, changing the character to Burmese instead of Japanese, as if that solved anything. The film stirred up so much controversy that the National Board of Review immediately strengthened its censorship guidelines. Yet ironically, The Cheat was praised in France as high art, with critics there hailing its innovative visual style. One French critic called it the first example of a distinctly American film language. The stark contrast between white female innocence and foreign male menace played into America's worst xenophobic fears, yet audiences couldn't look away. DeMille understood that controversy sells, and The Cheat became one of Paramount's highest-grossing films of 1915. This bold, troubling film established DeMille as Hollywood's master provocateur, decades before his biblical spectacles made him legendary. Hexon, 1922. Imagine sitting in a 1922 theater expecting typical entertainment, then being bombarded with graphic images of witches kissing the devil's backside, demonic births, and torture devices tearing into human flesh. That's exactly what happened to unsuspecting audiences who wandered into Hexon, the Danish-Swedish documentary that's still too extreme for some modern viewers. Director Benjamin Christensen spent years researching medieval witchcraft before creating this nightmarish vision that blurred the line between documentary and horror. The film shows elderly women confessing to flying on broomsticks after being tortured, demons churning butter with naked witches, and nuns falling into mass hysteria. One particularly disturbing sequence features the devil, played by Christensen himself, tempting a sleeping woman by whispering in her ear, while his long, flickering tongue suggests unspeakable acts. Censors across Europe and America slashed the film to ribbons. Sweden banned it outright, while American authorities demanded nearly a quarter of the footage be cut before release. Religious groups called it a danger to mental health and morality, while medical journals attacked its portrayal of mental illness as witchcraft. Yet film historians now recognize Hexon as revolutionary. Its innovative special effects, including stop-motion animation of flying witches and superimpositions of demons, influenced horror cinema for decades. The film cost over 2 million Swedish kroner, making it the most expensive Scandinavian silent film ever made. Christensen's masterstroke was connecting medieval superstition to modern treatment of women, suggesting that the hysterical women once burned as witches were now simply institutionalized. This feminist subtext was radical for 1922. William Burroughs later narrated a 1968 re-release titled Witchcraft Through the Ages, introducing this fever dream to the counterculture. Even today, those brave enough to watch Hexon in its uncensored form find themselves disturbed by how effectively this century-old film gets under the skin. Intolerance, 1916. D.W. Griffith went completely off the rails with Intolerance, burning through a mind-boggling $2.5 million budget, equivalent to over $60 million today, to create what might be the most ambitious film ever made. After facing backlash for his racist epic, The Birth of a Nation, Griffith didn't just apologize. He built literal Babylonian kingdoms to prove his point about humanity's cruelty. This 3.5-hour monster weaves together 4 stories across 2,500 years of history, jumping between ancient Babylon, biblical Judea, Renaissance France, and contemporary America. The Babylonian sequences required constructing 300-foot-tall sets with elephants and thousands of extras. One actress reportedly fainted 3 times during filming due to the overwhelming scale, when Griffith ran out of money, he pawned his own car to finish the production. Critics were bewildered. Some called it genius, others declared it an incomprehensible mess. Religious groups were outraged by its sympathetic portrayal of Jesus as merely one narrative thread rather than the central focus. Labor activists cheered its modern story of striking workers being gunned down by National Guardsmen, while conservatives denounced these same scenes as dangerous propaganda. The film flopped catastrophically at the box office, nearly bankrupting Griffith, yet its technical innovations transformed cinema forever. The famous cradle shot, a recurring image of a mother rocking a cradle that connects all four stories, pioneered the concept of the visual motif in film. Its rapid cross-cutting between parallel storylines remains a standard technique today. After its commercial failure, theater owners often cut the film into separate features or slashed entire storylines. For decades, no one saw Griffith's complete vision until film preservationists reconstructed it in the 1980s. While The Birth of a Nation remains infamous for its content, Intolerance was perhaps more revolutionary in form, a breathtaking, chaotic, beautiful failure that proved movies could aspire to the complexity of great literature, even as it drove its creator to financial ruin. Broken Blossoms, 1919. Don't let the poetic title fool you. Broken Blossoms tackled interracial romance, child abuse, and murder-suicide with a frankness that would be considered shocking even today. D.W. Griffith's intimate three-character drama follows a gentle Chinese immigrant who rescues and falls in love with an abused teenage girl in London's seedy Limehouse district. The film features Lillian Gish in a performance that still stuns viewers a century later. In the notorious closet scene, her brutal father hunts her with an axe while she spins in terror, her fingers pulling her mouth into a grotesque, forced smile, a technique Gish invented during filming that reportedly caused crew members to vomit from the tension. When the father finally breaks down the door, audiences literally screamed. Incredibly, Broken Blossoms premiered just as anti-Asian riots were erupting across America. The film portrayed a Chinese man, played in yellowface by white actor Richard Barthelmess, as morally superior to the white characters. While today we'd rightfully criticize the stereotypical portrayal and casting, in 1919, this humanizing depiction was revolutionary. Censors in several states demanded cuts to scenes where the Chinese character gazes adoringly at the white girl. The film's claustrophobic sets, some only 8 feet wide, created an oppressive atmosphere that mirrored the character's trapped circumstances. Griffith pioneered the use of soft focus and colored tints to enhance mood, bathing scenes of tenderness in warm amber, while sequences of violence appear in cold blue. Despite costing just $88,000, Broken Blossoms earned over $700,000, proving audiences would pay for challenging material. Critics were divided. Some hailed it as art, others condemned its depressing narrative. When re-released in the early 1920s, entire cities banned it for promoting miscegenation. Perhaps most telling is that while Griffith's more famous films have aged poorly, Broken Blossoms retains its emotional power, confronting domestic violence and racial prejudice with a compassion that was decades ahead of its time. Salome, 1923. Alla Nazimova threw her entire career away to make Salome, and Hollywood never forgave her for it. This avant-garde fever dream retells the biblical story of the princess who demands John the Baptist's head on a silver platter. Only Nazimova's version looks like what would happen if Oscar Wilde and Salvador Dali designed a nightclub in Babylon. The film's bold artistic choices still feel radical today. The sets are minimalist, geometric shapes. Costumes feature bizarre peacock headdresses and transparent outfits adorned with pearls, while the actors move in stylized, ballet-like gestures. Most scandalous was the famous Dance of the Seven Veils, performed by 44-year-old Nazimova playing a teenage Salome in a sequence that pushed the boundaries of what censors would allow. Behind the scenes, the rumors were even wilder. Hollywood gossip claimed the entire cast was comprised of gay and lesbian performers, selected by Nazimova herself. As one of Hollywood's first openly bisexual stars, Nazimova already faced scrutiny, but Salome pushed things too far. She invested $350,000 of her own money, her entire life savings, to maintain creative control. The gamble failed spectacularly. The film was a commercial disaster that effectively ended her career as a leading lady. Critics were merciless. Variety dismissed it as a piece of highbrow triviality, while religious groups condemned its sensual portrayal of a biblical story. The film's cinematographer, Charles Bryant, was listed as director, But it was an open secret that Natsimova herself directed, making Salome one of the earliest American films helmed by a woman. For decades, Salome was nearly impossible to see, existing in fragments until film preservationists reconstructed it in the 1990s. Modern critics now recognize it as a groundbreaking work that brought the aesthetics of German Expressionism and Art Deco to American cinema years before these styles became mainstream. Nazimova's bold artistic choice may have destroyed her Hollywood career, but it secured her legacy as a visionary who sacrificed everything for her art. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920. German audiences stumbling out of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in 1920 must have felt like they'd been drugged. Nothing in cinema had prepared them for this nightmarish vision where walls lean at impossible angles, shadows are painted directly onto the sets, and reality itself seems broken. This wasn't just a movie, it was a deliberate assault on the senses that dared viewers to question their own sanity. Director Robert Wiene created a world of pure madness, following a hypnotist who uses a sleepwalker to commit murders. The film's twisted visual style, with its jagged architecture, distorted perspectives, and bizarre geometric patterns, externalized the psychological horror in ways never before attempted. One theater owner in Berlin reportedly had to call doctors when multiple patrons suffered panic attacks during screenings. The political undertones proved just as controversial. Made in a Germany still reeling from World War I, the film's themes of authoritarian control and blind obedience struck raw nerves. Some critics interpreted Dr. Caligari as a symbol of the German government that had led the nation into disaster, while others saw the film itself as dangerously nihilistic. Screenwriter Karl Mayer based the story on his own traumatic experiences with aggressive military psychiatrists during the war. International reactions were equally intense. In France, riots broke out at some screenings between those who saw it as German artistic genius and others who viewed it as enemy propaganda. American distributor Goldwyn Pictures delayed its U.S. release, worried audiences wouldn't understand it, then marketed it with the tagline, "You'll feel it crawling up your spine." The film's infamous twist ending, revealing the narrator himself is an asylum inmate, was actually added against the writer's wishes. They had intended a more politically radical ending that implicated authority figures, but producers feared censorship. Despite the compromise, Caligari transformed cinema, proving films could be subjective, unreliable, and psychologically complex. Its influence stretches from horror to film noir, from Tim Burton to Christopher Nolan, all because Wiene dared to visualize the inside of a broken mind for audiences who weren't ready for the journey. Un Chien Andalou, 1929. Salvador Dalí and Luis Buñuel didn't just want to shock audiences with Un Chien Andalou, they wanted to attack them. Before the premiere, Buñuel reportedly filled his pockets with rocks, ready to defend himself against the riot he expected their 16-minute surrealist nightmare would provoke. The film opens with a man slicing open a woman's eyeball with a razor, actually a dead calf's eye, and somehow gets more disturbing from there. Created from dreams and unconscious images, the film follows no logical plot. Ants crawl from a hole in a man's palm. A severed hand gets poked with a stick in the street. A man drags pianos loaded with dead donkeys and priests. These inexplicable scenes unfold without explanation, deliberately frustrating any attempt at rational interpretation. The directors boasted they rejected any image that might make sense. The premiere at Paris's Studio des Ursulines became legendary. Aristocrats, artists, and celebrities packed the theater, uncertain what they were about to witness. Contrary to Buñuel's expectations, the audience didn't riot. They applauded wildly. The filmmakers were devastated. Their attempt to scandalize had instead been embraced as high art. In response, they quickly began work on their next film, L'Âge d'Or, determined to create something even more offensive. While never officially banned, Un Chien Andalou was considered too extreme for general release. For decades, it circulated through private film clubs and underground screenings, building a mythic reputation. When finally shown on BBC television in the 1960s, the broadcaster received hundreds of outraged complaints. Financed by Buñuel's mother for just 25,000 francs, this micro-budget experiment changed cinema forever, inspiring generations of filmmakers from David Lynch to David Cronenberg. Its dreamlike editing techniques, cutting between disconnected images, linked by movement or shape rather than logic, created a new visual language. The ultimate irony is that this deliberately meaningless film has probably been analyzed more thoroughly than any other short in history, with scholars still debating its significance nearly a century later. The Sheik, 1921. Rudolph Valentino's desert romance, The Chic, wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural phenomenon that had women fainting in the aisles and preachers condemning it from pulpits across America. This tale of a headstrong English lady kidnapped and eventually wooed by an Arab chieftain ignited a moral panic about female desire that revealed America's deepest anxieties about gender, race, and power. The film's infamous tent sequence, where the sheik stands over his captive and declares, "When an Arab sees a woman he wants, he takes her," sent shockwaves through polite society. Women openly swooned over Valentino's smoldering gaze and dominant persona, while newspaper editorials warned of the film's destructive influence on female morality. The Chicago Board of Censors demanded cuts to scenes suggesting the heroine had been compromised, while religious groups organized boycotts, claiming the film promoted both non-marital relations and miscegenation. Behind the scenes, Paramount was playing a calculated game. They marketed the film's exoticism and danger, while including a convenient plot twist revealing the sheik was actually European by birth, thereby solving the racial anxiety for white audiences. This didn't stop moral guardians from panicking as chic mania swept the nation. Department stores sold chic perfume, clothing, and cosmetics. Dance halls offered lessons in the chic shake. Young women began calling attractive men sheiks and themselves shebas. Despite, or because of, the controversy, the film grossed over $1 million on a $200,000 budget. Valentino became cinema's first male love symbol, a status that troubled American men so deeply that one Chicago newspaper published an editorial attacking him as a pink powder puff who threatened American masculinity. Film historian Kevin Brownlow noted that The Chic represented a crucial shift in depicting female desire on screen. Before, women were passive recipients of male attention. After Valentino, they could be shown actively desiring. This terrified cultural gatekeepers more than any explicit content could have. For all its problematic elements viewed through modern eyes, The Chic exposed the hypocrisy of a society that preferred its women desireless, and forever changed how romance would be portrayed on screen. Pandoras Box, 1929. Louise Brooks didn't just star in Pandora's Box. She detonated a sexual revolution with her portrayal of Lulu, a completely amoral woman who destroys every man and woman drawn into her orbit. With her iconic black bob haircut and unnervingly direct gaze, Brooks created a character so sexually liberated that 1929 audiences couldn't decide whether to condemn her or worship her. Director G.W. Pobst's adaptation of Frank Wedekind's controversial plays follows Lulu from kept woman to fugitive to Jack the Ripper's final victim. Along the way, she seduces men, women, and even her elderly benefactor's son at his father's wedding. The film's frank depiction of attraction between women, including cinema's first major lesbian character in Countess Geschwitz, was revolutionary. One sequence showing Lulu backstage at a theater with her female admirer was cut from most international releases. German censors demanded multiple edits before allowing release, objecting to everything from Lulu's unrepentant hedonism to the sympathetic portrayal of a lesbian character. In America, where Brooks had abandoned Hollywood to make this film in Germany, critics were vicious. The New York Times called it morally repellent, while regional censorship boards either heavily edited it or banned it outright. Pobst's unflinching camera captured Brooks in ways that still feel modern. Her naturalistic acting style contrasted sharply with the exaggerated performances typical of the era. The film's most controversial aspect was its refusal to moralize. Unlike Hollywood productions where fallen women face punishment, Pandora's Box presents Lulu's eventual murder by Jack the Ripper not as judgment, but as tragic coincidence. The film was a commercial failure that ended Brooks's career. Yet its reputation grew through underground screenings. French film theorists rediscovered it in the 1950s, declaring Brooks a lost genius. Modern critics rank it among cinema's greatest achievements, with Brooks' performance recognized as one of film's most iconic creations. Pandora's Box proved decades ahead of its time in its unsentimental exploration of desire and its tragic consequences, a film too honest for the era that produced it. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. No film demonstrates cinema's power for both artistic innovation and devastating harm like The Birth of a Nation. D.W. Griffith's three-hour Civil War epic literally wrote the language of modern filmmaking while simultaneously reigniting America's most dangerous hate group. This poisonous masterpiece remains cinema's most uncomfortable paradox, a technical revolution built upon abhorrent racism. Griffith pioneered techniques we now take for granted. Close-ups to capture emotion, cross-cutting between parallel action scenes, night photography, and color tinting for dramatic effect. His battle sequences, featuring hundreds of extras, set standards for spectacle that influenced filmmakers for generations. Yet these innovations served a narrative portraying the Ku Klux Klan as heroic saviors while depicting Black Americans, mostly white actors in blackface, as animalistic predators. The film's release sparked immediate protests. The NAACP organized picket lines outside theaters. Riots erupted in several cities, including Boston, where Black protesters hurled eggs at the screen. In Lafayette, Indiana, a white man murdered a Black teenager after watching the film, telling police it had inspired him. Despite the backlash, or because of it, the film became the highest-grossing movie of the silent era, earning an unprecedented $50 to $100 million. Most disturbing was the film's real-world impact. William Joseph Simmons used the release to launch a KKK revival, conducting a cross-burning ceremony atop Stone Mountain, Georgia, days before the Atlanta premiere. Membership swelled from virtually nothing to millions within a few years. When President Woodrow Wilson screened it at the White House, the first film ever shown there, he allegedly remarked, "It's like writing history with lightning." Modern film scholars face the uncomfortable task of acknowledging the film's technical brilliance while condemning its content. Spike Lee's film school professor showed it to students with the warning, "This is like Technicolor for its time. But also, this film is like a technological wonder. That's why I'm showing it. That's the only reason." The controversy hasn't faded with time. A planned 2004 screening at a Los Angeles theater was canceled after arson threats. No other film in history has demonstrated so clearly that innovation without moral compass can become a weapon. Battleship Potemkin, 1925. Soviet director Sergei Eisenstein didn't just want Battleship Potemkin to be watched. He wanted it to incite revolutions. This fictionalized account of a 1905 naval mutiny employed such powerful imagery and innovative editing techniques that governments around the world banned it, fearing it would actually cause audiences to rise up against their leaders. They weren't entirely wrong. The film's most famous sequence, the Odessa Steps Massacre, depicts Tsarist soldiers marching in mechanical unison down a grand staircase, mercilessly shooting civilians, including a baby in a runaway carriage that bounces down the steps. The scene's rapid cutting between close-ups of terrified faces and wide shots of chaos creates an overwhelming emotional impact that audiences in 1925 had never experienced. After screenings in Berlin, communist demonstrations erupted in the streets. Eisenstein's theory of montage, creating meaning through the collision of images, transformed filmmaking forever. His rapid editing during the massacre, 150 shots in just 6 minutes, manipulated viewers' emotions with scientific precision. The British Board of Film Censors banned the film until 1954, calling it revolutionary propaganda and noting with alarm that it made viewers sympathize with mutineers. Nazi Germany banned it permanently, with propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels ironically praising it as the kind of effective filmmaking the Reich should emulate. Despite, or because of, these bans, Potemkin became one of the most smuggled films in history. Underground screenings were held in workers' clubs across Europe and America, with lookouts posted to warn of police raids. In France, some theaters showed a censored version that reversed the narrative, making the sailors villains and the officers heroes, a distortion that enraged Eisenstein. The film's power transcended politics. Even American directors who opposed communism, like Alfred Hitchcock and Brian De Palma, borrowed extensively from the Odessa Steps sequence. Eisenstein completed the film in just 4 months at age 27, working with such limited resources that he couldn't afford to film retakes. On its 50th anniversary in 1975, the film topped an international critics poll as the greatest film ever made, proof that propaganda, when created with genius, can transform into timeless art. The Gold Rush, 1925. Charlie Chaplin turned cannibalism into comedy with The Gold Rush, proving his genius by making audiences laugh at starvation, suicide, and human desperation. His tale of the little tramp seeking fortune in the Klondike contains some of cinema's most iconic images. Chaplin eating his boiled shoe like gourmet cuisine, performing the dance of the dinner rolls, and a cabin teetering on a cliff's edge. Yet behind the laughter lay a production as brutal as the story it told. Filming began in the Sierra Nevada mountains with 600 extras, including many actual homeless people paid to recreate the famous Chilkoot Pass scene. The harsh conditions quickly became dangerous. Temperatures dropped to 20 degrees below zero, causing equipment failures and frostbite among crew members. One actress developed pleurisy so severe she had to be hospitalized. After 3 weeks of these conditions, Chaplin abandoned the location, returning to Hollywood to rebuild the Klondike in his studio. The famous shoe-eating scene required Chaplin to perform take after take of consuming a prop shoe made of licorice, which caused him to become so ill that he required medical attention. The cabin teetering sequence took 3 weeks to film, using an elaborate system of counterweights. When the first attempt failed, Chaplin ordered the entire set rebuilt. Most controversial was the cannibal sequence, where starving prospectors hallucinate each other as food. Big Jim sees Chaplin transform into a giant chicken, a scene requiring a complex chicken costume that took days to perfect. Censors in several countries demanded cuts to this sequence, finding the comedy too dark for public consumption. Religious groups objected to making light of such desperate circumstances, particularly the implication of cannibalism. Despite these challenges, The Gold Rush became Chaplin's most successful silent film, grossing over $4.25 million at a time when movie tickets cost 25 cents. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece that transcended comedy. Chaplin himself, when asked later in life how he wished to be remembered, simply said, "For The Gold Rush." By transforming human suffering into universal comedy, Chaplin created what James Agee called a comedy of murders, a film that finds laughter in the darkest corners of human experience. The Passion of Joan of Arc, 1928. Carl Theodor Dreyer did something unthinkable while filming The Passion of Joan of Arc. He tortured his lead actress. To capture the spiritual agony of the 15th century French martyr, he forced Renée Falconetti to kneel for hours on stone floors, shaved her head on camera against her wishes, and denied her makeup despite filming in harsh, unflattering close-ups. The result is arguably the most emotionally devastating performance ever captured on film, with Falconetti's tear-streaked face in states of transcendent suffering that blur the line between acting and genuine distress. The film consists almost entirely of close-ups, an approach so radical for 1928 that it disoriented audiences. Dreyer built a massive concrete set of Joan's trial chamber, then barely showed it, instead focusing relentlessly on faces. He shot actors without makeup under harsh lighting that revealed every pore and wrinkle. To maintain authenticity, Dreyer insisted that the actors playing priests and judges not see Falconetti until filming began, capturing their genuine reactions to her appearance. Catholic authorities in France were outraged by the film's portrayal of corrupt church officials condemning Joan. Archbishop of Paris Jean Verdier demanded changes before release. When Dreyer refused, Catholic organizations called for boycotts. The film had already faced censorship in France for its unflattering portrayal of English soldiers, with nationalists claiming it would damage Franco-British relations. Tragedy struck when the original negative was destroyed in a warehouse fire. Dreyer created a second version from alternate takes, but this too was lost. For decades, the film existed only in butchered edited versions until a complete print was miraculously discovered in 1981 in a janitor's closet of a Norwegian mental institution. The film's commercial failure devastated Falconetti so completely that she never acted in another film. Her haunting performance, often cited as cinema's greatest, came at a terrible personal cost. Film critic Pauline Kael wrote that watching Falconetti's face in The Passion of Joan of Arc is to see the soul of a human being, exposed for the first time in the history of the filmed image. This spiritual transparency came from Dreyer's uncompromising methods, proving that sometimes artistic cruelty creates transcendent beauty. Noseratu, 1922. F.W. Murnau knew he was playing with fire when he decided to film Nosferatu, an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula with the names changed. What he couldn't have predicted was that his Gothic masterpiece would not only face legal destruction, but also become entangled in occult rumors that persist a century later. This shadow-drenched nightmare featuring Max Schreck's rat-like Count Orlok created cinema's most unsettling vampire, one so disturbing that audiences genuinely questioned whether Schreck was human. Filming took place in real Gothic locations across Germany, including a decrepit 13th century castle, where cast and crew reported strange occurrences. Actor Gustav von Wangenheim later claimed Schreck would disappear for hours between scenes and could be found hanging upside down in dark corners. The production's use of real spiders, rats, and coffins added to the pervasive atmosphere of dread, Most disturbing was Shrek's complete physical transformation, achieved through a combination of makeup, prosthetics, and the actor's unnervingly committed performance. When Stoker's widow Florence discovered the unauthorized adaptation, she sued for copyright infringement and won. The court ordered all copies of Nosferatu destroyed, an artistic death sentence. Murnau was forced to declare bankruptcy. Fortunately, several prints had already been distributed internationally, allowing the film to survive its legal execution. The film's occult reputation grew when rumors spread that Shrek had died shortly after filming. He actually lived until 1936. This misconception helped fuel bizarre theories that Murnau had cast an actual vampire in the role. Decades later, the 2000 film Shadow of the Vampire playfully explored this urban legend. Even more strangely, in 2015, Murnau's skull was stolen from his grave, adding another macabre chapter to the film's legacy. Despite its troubled history, Nosferatu pioneered horror techniques still used today. Murnau's use of negative film to create an otherworldly blue moonlight effect, rapid editing to suggest supernatural speed, and shadows that move independently of their owners established visual grammar for the genre. The film's famous shot of Orlok's shadow climbing stairs, hand extended with claw-like fingers, remains one of horror's most imitated images. By surviving its ordered destruction, Nosferatu became cinema's ultimate undead creation, a film that refused to die. Metropolis, 1927. Fritz Lang's Metropolis didn't just push boundaries, it obliterated them, nearly destroying its studio, UFA, in the process. This futuristic epic about class warfare in a mechanized city cost an astronomical 5 million Reichsmarks, making it the most expensive film ever made at that time. The production was so grueling that it nearly killed its star, with actress Brigitte Helm suffering permanent scars from the metal robot costume she wore for hours, while real flames burned around her. The film's massive city sets required 750 child extras for a single flooding sequence, where many caught pneumonia in the cold water. Lang was notorious for his perfectionism, forcing extras to stand in freezing water for up to 14 hours and reportedly throwing actress Helm downstairs repeatedly to get the right expression of terror. One actor described working with Lang as sheer hell. The director used 1,100 bald extras for crowd scenes and 25,000 men's suits and 11,000 pairs of shoes to dress them. When finally released, Metropolis ran 153 minutes, far too long for commercial exhibition. German distributor UFA and American distributor Paramount took scissors to the print, cutting nearly an hour of footage. The butchered version made little narrative sense, with entire subplots and characters disappearing. Critics were merciless. H.G. Wells called it the silliest film, while the New York Times dismissed it as a technical marvel with feet of clay. The film's politics angered both sides of the spectrum. The Nazis initially banned it for communist tendencies before Goebbels reversed course, praising its vision while ignoring its humanist message. Meanwhile, communist critics attacked its simplistic, the heart mediates between hand and brain resolution as naive bourgeois sentiment. For decades, Metropolis existed only in truncated form until a restoration effort began in the 1980s. Then, miraculously, in 2008, a nearly complete 16mm print was discovered in a small museum in Argentina. This version, restored and released in 2010, finally revealed Lang's complete vision 83 years after its premiere. Despite its troubled release, Metropolis transformed science fiction cinema with its dystopian cityscape, robot technology, and social commentary. Its visual influence stretches from Blade Runner to Star Wars, The Fifth Element to Dark City. Lang's breathtaking vision of the future, created without computers, with pure human ingenuity and suffering, remains cinema's most ambitious early spectacle. From Brigitte Helm's metal robot suit to Falconetti's genuine tears, these pioneering filmmakers pushed both technology and human endurance to create images that still shock us a century later. Which of these controversial classics would you dare to watch at midnight? Would you have banned them or praised them? Tell us in the comments below, and ask yourself, have modern filmmakers with all their digital tools ever matched the raw audacity of these silent rebels who changed everything without saying a word?